Zhao Wenbing, the last holder of the Mozhang Grand Seal of the Mozhang sect in China. He is the most mysterious folk Taoist in China. With his chivalrous heart, righteous courage, and profound Taoist skills, he saves lives between the realms of life and death. He kills those who are beyond redemption. But what can one do? Yet he is consumed by flames. He faces divine retribution. Why did I, in this life, incur the hatred of the heavenly sage, the absolute queen, and heaven itself, a mysterious and spiritual ancient temple, an evil spirit that lives for 1,000 years, a curse from which there is no escape? The Taoist arts of heaven, earth, Xian, and Ming, his experiences are legendary and true. Next, Miaojiang will revisit this epic novel and manhwa adaptation, The Last Taoist, with everyone. My name is Xia Yi. I am 26 years old. I am a neurology specialist at Hangzhou Hospital. Right now, I am in the operating room, trying to save my lifesaver, Zhao Wenbin, who saved me from the hands of the Grim Reaper years ago. Now, it's my turn to save him. The surgery has already been going on for more than 10 hours. Nurse Pei Tan glanced at the monitor. She nervously told me, Dr. Xia, the patient's brain waves are weakening. Continue with the surgery. I issued the command without any doubt. This moment is about from the King of Hell. There is no room for error. At that moment, the sound of beeping suddenly rang out. It was the life monitor's rapid beeping, followed by another beep. Master Za's heartbeat began to slow down. If the surgery continued, it could lead to death. Clang! A shock ran through me. The scalpel in my hand fell to the ground. The sound of it hitting the floor made my head spin. This can't be happening. Master Zha wouldn't do this. He's the best Taoist priest. This can't be happening. Just as I was panicking, the door to the operating room was pushed open. It was Director Tan from the 9th lab. He was also my teacher. The teacher directly asked me how the surgery went. The surgery failed. I couldn't reactivate Master Za's consciousness. I felt miserable and guilty, and said, my emotions surged. I'm so useless. What good is this medical skill of mine? When Master Za needed me most, I was powerless. The teacher didn't say anything after hearing that, just patted me on the shoulder, and told me the surgery had already been performed 3 times. You've done your best. Don't blame yourself. Go out and rest for a while. Master Zha, I'll leave it to the teacher. I arrived at the hallway. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. I looked up. It was Xiao Leng. Leng Yiran, a reporter from the newspaper. Then I looked down again. I probed, as expected. Conservative treatment won't work at all. Master Zha's brain death is just a matter of time. Relax. Xiaolong peeled a candy and offered it to my mouth. He put it to my lips. The surgery had been going on for so long. I was completely exhausted. Having recovered a little strength, I said again, now we can only place our hope in the 9th laboratory. Have you thought it through? You might not come back. Leng said worriedly. I understand, that's why the teacher wouldn't let me near the 9th laboratory. But it's the only way to save Master Za. Xiao Leng, please. I pleaded with him. He looked at me for a long time. My fist collided heavily with his. Don't worry, bro. We've decided to take action tonight. Here's our plan. Leng will be responsible for distracting 2 security guards, and I'll handle getting Master Zha out. Finally, we'll meet up in Lab 9 on the -3 floor. We soon arrived at the floor. I hid around the corner. I only saw Leng Yiran rushing out. She threw the lollipop in her mouth at the security guard. Then she let out a string of curses, making the 2 security guards furious. They took off after Leng. As for me, according to the plan, I transported Master Za to the 9th laboratory on the -3 RD floor. Just as I arrived at the lab, the door to the lab suddenly opened. A person's head poked out from inside. It turned out to be Leng Yiran. I really didn't expect him to arrive so quickly. We moved Master Zha inside, placed him on the experimental machine, and then closed the door. I explained to Xiaolong that Lab 9 was a project I completed with my teacher. Through this technology, I can enter Master Zha's subconscious. He just needs to realize it himself. Ah, it's here. I've thought of a solution. I wrote Master Za's talisman for Lingling on my arm. At the right moment, it will definitely remind Master Za. Just as we were about to finish preparing everything, there was a sudden, urgent banging sound at the door. It was Director Tan. I saw the teacher outside shouting for the security guard. As the door was being slammed, I immediately said, Xiaoleng, hold the door first. I'll go start the machine. We don't have much time. Then I immediately placed the consciousness sensor on Master Zha's head. The teacher outside was loudly shouting, Xia Yi, assistant. You cannot enter Zha Wenbin's consciousness. I could have saved so many more people. Why would I die for that worthless Wenbin? But I can't think about that now. If Master Zha hadn't saved me back then, I would have been dead long ago. Lingling wouldn't be in a coma either. I studied medicine for 13 years just to wake Lingling up. Even now, I still can't save her. But I absolutely cannot let Master Za suffer another accident. Teacher, please forgive my selfishness. Then I pressed the sensor button. The moment I pressed the sensor, the door finally burst open. Xiao Leng was thrown to the ground, looking in my direction, loudly calling out, Xia Yi, you must wake up with Master Zhao. And this became the last image I saw before my consciousness faded. After a careful observation, I suddenly froze. Isn't this Hongsuan, my hometown? Why is the child who returned late cursed and in a coma? Why are archaeologists being stopped? There are rumors of ghosts in the temple, dating back 13 years. How should we respond to save Master Zhao? Please watch this episode of Hongsuan Ghost Master. My name is Xia Yi. In order to wake up my savior, Cha Wenbin, I came into his consciousness world. I arrived in Hongsuan 13 years ago, just as I was observing carefully. A large hand suddenly slapped my head from behind. Xia Yi, why are you daydreaming? I was so scared I froze. I turned my head and saw a fat man. I couldn't remember who he was. The man continued, guys, cheer up. Hongsuan is here. The general's temple is in the village. The general's temple has a 1,000-year history. Our archaeological team's mission this time is to conduct a preliminary survey of it. Only after I heard what he said, did I finally realize that the program had matched me with a plausible identity, an archaeology team member. And I remember, when I was very young, an archaeology team did indeed come to Hongsuan from the province. Could this be Master Zhao's consciousness event? While I was still pondering this, a dark figure came running from the other end of the stone bridge, shouting loudly, hey, leaders. Sorry to keep you waiting, it's already quite late. It wasn't until it got closer that I could see clearly. It turned out to be the village head of Hongsuan. In my memory, the village head passed away when I was in college. It should be right. This is Hongsuan, 13 years ago, where I grew up. The fat guy next to me had already started chatting with the village head. Only then did I learn that our archaeological team's purpose for this trip was to follow the instructions from the province and investigate the general's temple in Hongsuan. The archaeological team originally planned to take a look at the temple today, but the village chief strongly dissuaded us, saying the temple was cursed. Then the village chief began to tell us what happened. It turned out that 10 days ago, several children from the village went to play at the general's temple. After returning, they fell into a coma. They saw doctors, but nothing worked. Later, other villagers also started falling into comas one after another. Rumors spread through the village that the curse of the general's temple had been activated by one of the children. However, the fat man didn't believe in such superstitious legends. Could it be a contagious disease or something? The village chief replied, somewhat agitated, it's definitely not an epidemic. We've already invited the head Taoist priest from the Maoshan sect to take a look. He said it's caused by evil forces. Don't go there. You'll lose your lives. Upon hearing this, I thought the Taoist from the Maoshan sect must be Master Zhao. The village chief wanted to say more, but was grabbed by the collar by the. He said fiercely, we are carrying out provincial duties. What? Do you intend to obstruct official business? I saw something was wrong. The village head hesitated for a moment, then he agreed. On the way, the archaeologists still didn't believe what the village head had said. They even taunted him, saying, old brother, you farmers are too naive. You must have been fooled by those Maoshan Taoists. The village head didn't argue with them. He said, you'll know when you see the child. The alleys in the village are crisscrossed in all directions. By this time, the sky has darkened. The alleys are as dark as the mouth of a monster, with towering eaves, casting eerie shadows in the darkness. It is strangely quiet here. The village chief's house is at the other end of the village. You have to pass through a chestnut grove. It was when I was passing through an alleyway. A child's crying could be heard from the bamboo forest inside. I stopped in my tracks. Meanwhile, they kept bragging and chatting. They didn't notice my unusual behavior behind them. The crying seemed to have some kind of magic. It drew me deeper into the bamboo forest. Why did the black cat appear in the eerie bamboo forest? Its voice was like a baby's. A mysterious Taoist priest descends from the heavens. Safu wonders who exactly has traveled back 13 years ago to save Master Zha. He wonders how he should respond next. Please watch this episode, Bamboo Forest Cat Demon. Continuing from last time, after I went deep into the bamboo forest, the crying stopped abruptly. Just as I was filled with doubt, I was suddenly tripped. It turned out to be a large bamboo basket. Nervously opening the bamboo basket lid, it was empty. What's going on? Something's not right. I should hurry back. At that moment, I suddenly heard a noise behind me. I curiously turned my head to look. I discovered a pair of glowing eyes in the darkness, glaring at me fiercely. It felt as though I had been locked onto by a vicious beast, as if I were its chosen prey. My soul almost left me from fear. I stumbled backward and fell to the ground. I screamed in terror, there's a ghost. As I fell, the owner of those eyes jumped out. It was a cat, completely black from head to tail. It crouched eerily in front of me. Its eyes narrowed. It seemed to be sizing me up. Or perhaps it was looking at me with a playful, bloodthirsty glint. And I hadn't noticed any of this. It was just a cat. Just as I breathed a sigh of relief, and was about to get up. The cat suddenly went crazy, as if its fur had been blown up. It was opening its mouth wide, revealing who knows how many sharp, pointed teeth, and letting out a piercing cry. This is wrong. Something's wrong with this cat. I looked up. Countless eyes stared at me from the shadowy bamboo forest. Terrified by this eerie sight, I ran out as fast as my legs would carry me. How could there be so many cats here? The faint cries seemed to be right behind me. I dare not look back. I'm afraid that if I do, I'll be caught. The more I fear something, the more it comes. My foot got caught in a bamboo shoot. I fell heavily to the ground. Help! Just as I was protecting my head, waiting for the final judgment, a figure fell from the sky. 2 fingers side by side. The bat is thrown. Mouth spits a sudden convulsion. In my name. Grant me true thunder. The Supreme Lord Laozi, urgently as the law commands. Thunder rumbles, a clear sky suddenly strikes. Several bolts of heavenly thunder strike down. It stung my eyes so badly I couldn't open them. And the cat demons in the bamboo forest hadn't even reacted, before they were reduced to dust and ashes, scattered in the air. That voice, it sounds so familiar. After I saw clearly the dark shadow before me, I realized it was a Taoist priest, dressed in a Taoist robe interwoven with gold and silver threads. His long hair was styled in a Taoist bun. He wore white shoes. The Taoist turned his head. His delicate face was illuminated by the setting sun. It was Zonbing, the leader of the Maoshan Tianjin Gao, my lifesaver whom I had been searching for. The moment I saw Master Zha, my heart pounded like a drum. Standing there, overwhelmed with emotions. Master Zha, you've saved my life again. Master Zha glanced at me sideways. He teased, kid. You're not dead, are you? At that moment, the only thought in my mind was, Master Zha, this time, I will definitely take you home. Why does the temple enshrine the statue of the Zhao family's old lord? Why is there a coffin in the middle of the main hall? Traveling back 13 years to save Master Zha, how should I respond? Please watch this episode, Night Visit to the General. Our village is in a mountainous area. There's a very large temple in the village. It's built of gray bricks. That temple, I don't know from which dynasty or generation it is. When our great-grandfather fled here from outside during a famine, the temple was already here. But back then, it was already abandoned. 100 years have passed, and it has become even more dilapidated. In the following years, during the renovation of the old town, a large part of the temple was destroyed. Only the main hall remains intact. Before I knew it, it was already evening. Our group arrived at the general's temple. There were many marks on the walls of the temple, stained by smoke from fireworks. This main hall should have been the main building at that time. The top of the hall features openwork wood carvings. It depicts taiji, the bagua, gourds, cranes, and other symbols. The door to the hall was tightly shut. Master Zha stepped forward and pushed open the door. The sound of branches echoes through the empty hall. It's incredibly eerie. The entire hall is empty, except for a large, dark red coffin in the center. A thick layer of dust has settled on top of it. The musty smell in the room is very strong. There's a large red coffin in the temple. Anyone who sees it would be shocked. Fatty asked, how can there be a coffin in this temple? Master Zha looked at him jokingly, teasingly saying, the leader of the archaeological team is afraid of coffins. Fatty's face flushed red. He explained, which eye of yours saw me being scared? What's there to be afraid of in a coffin? His trembling voice, however, spoke volumes. Master Zha smiled. He didn't expose me. At that moment, I looked at the moonlight filtering through the cracks in the roof tiles, at the murals on the wall, and asked, isn't that the Taoist immortal Lao Tzu? Why would a Buddhist temple have Taoist things? Zhao Wenbin also came up. He stared at the cryptic writing on the wall. A low, explanatory voice. This place isn't a general's temple at all. It's just a Taoist temple. And this Taoism isn't the righteous path. It's an evil cult. He spoke, arriving beside the large red coffin in the center. He patted the coffin. Continuing, he said, the exact origins of this temple can only be determined by examining the contents of the coffin. Saying this, he produced a lighter from somewhere. He lit a stick of incense. The fat man saw this. He shouted loudly, quack. Stop right there. What are you doing? Master Cha ignored him. He respectfully placed a stick of incense on the coffin. He mumbled something about the tranquility of the ancestral tomb in the new village, breaking the old case, summoning the 10 directions. Then he walked to the wall. Lao Jun stood still in front. He respectfully lit a stick of incense. I asked Master Zha beside me in confusion, is there any special meaning to this? Master Zha looked at me. pointed to the incense beside the coffin, and explained, if this incense burns all the way through, it means the coffin won't cause any major trouble. On the other hand, if the incense goes out halfway, it means the coffin's owner is already unhappy. We need to hurry and move it out. At this moment, the incense had just burned out. Master Jia pushed the coffin bag hard, but found it wouldn't open. He shouted, silly son, oh, go get the next person to help me move the coffin board. He called out several times, finding I didn't respond, and looked towards me. But at that moment, my gaze was caught by the incense stick burning before the Lao Jun statue, because it had gone out before it had finished burning. Master Jia also saw it, and muttered, oh no. He went over, muttering to himself, strange. The incense is for the ancestral master. Dead people have no opinion. Why would the ancestral master have an opinion? Saying this, he reached out to touch the portrait. With a bang, a gunshot rang out. The bullet hit the wall beside Master Jia. Master Jia turned around in surprise. I held my gun, fearfully looking towards Master Jia's direction. Then, the trembling voice of the fat man who fell backward in terror also came. Quack. Someone's behind you. Why is Shi Chang bleeding so profusely? Why did the coffin in the temple make a sound and send us back 13 years? To save Master Jia, what should we do next? Please watch this episode, Night Raid on the General. In the General's temple, the shadow of an old man with a white beard mysteriously appeared behind Xia Wenbin. I shouted, Master Jia. Carefully raising my gun, I fired wildly, only to give the wall a physical exorcism. Xia Wenbin turned around, startled and confused, looking at Fatty and me. And I, still shaken, explained, just now, an old man with a white beard was standing behind you, trying to touch you. I haven't finished yet. Then, Xia Wenbin made a dismissive gesture with his hand. He switched on his flashlight and shone it on the wall. He softly said, come here. There's something. Let's go and take a look. Dark red liquid was actually flowing from the bullet holes left on the wall just now, just like blood. The bright white light illuminated the mottled wall and the bulging blood. Unspeakable meaning. In this scene, let alone the fat man and me, even Xia Wenbin was shocked. Much less in this mysterious general's temple. Then, an endless stench of blood spread. I've spent years in the operating room, so I'm all too familiar with the smell of blood. But at this moment, he still covered his nose. Meanwhile, the fat guys could no longer hold back and started gagging. The smell of blood was overwhelming. Zhan Bing, who had reached the wall, dared not be careless. He immediately recited one of the Taoist incantations, the incantation to reverence the heavenly gods. The bad luck of heaven and earth disperses. The mystery of the cave is profound and clear. The 8 directions divine powers of Taiyuan. Make my natural spiritual treasures and fortune known to the 9 heavens, urgently and as the law dictates. After the 3 transformations incantation, the smell of blood in the temple seemed to have decreased significantly. Xia Wenbing took out the crowbar prepared for opening the coffin, and plunged it into the bullet hole from earlier. With a forceful pry, sure enough, a brick wall collapsed with a loud crash. The scene that followed shocked everyone present. The fat man and one of them immediately started vomiting. They could clearly see that there was a human-shaped wax cocoon in the wall. Blood was flowing out from several bullet holes on the top. Why is there a wax cocoon in the wall of this ancient temple? Things have reached this point. I'm afraid it has already exceeded everyone's imagination. Could there really be a person inside this human-shaped wax cocoon? Just then, suddenly, there was a creaking sound of a wooden board shifting. Before anyone could react, the wax cocoon across from them could no longer withstand the pressure. With a loud crash, it fell down. It landed right in front of Xia Wenbin. Xia Wenbin shouted in alarm. He quickly turned around. The coffin lid that hadn't been pried open earlier now had a slight gap. Xia Wenbin quickly moved to the side of the coffin. He pushed it over with one hand. He closed the coffin lid that had already been cracked open. Then he applied some medicine. He flipped over and stood on top of the coffin lid. He instructed 2 archaeological team members to hold the coffin lid down, one in front, one behind. Then he took out a chalk line. With the fastest speed, he drew a divine axe on the coffin. Legend has it that this ink-line marker was invented by the carpenter Lu Ban. The ink-line marker restraining the coffin is said to be used to subdue the zombies inside. It's like a magical binding spell to keep them from rising. After doing all this, Xia Wenbin went to check the cocoon. Although it was wrapped in a thick layer of wax, it was still vaguely discernible that there was a person inside. After confirming everything was alright, Xia Wenbin explained, the yin energy is extremely heavy now. Staying any longer would be very disadvantageous. Let's prepare to withdraw. Everyone, let's retreat together. Before leaving, they locked the main gate. Traveling back 13 years. To save Master Xia, what should I do? Please watch this episode, The Cursed Child. On the way to Go Dan's house, I was lured into danger by a strange baby's cry. Then Master Za descended from the heavens. A thunder talisman. The cat demon turned into mockery. I was so excited that I froze in place, muttering to myself, when Master Za heard me call his name. He had a bamboo skewer in his mouth, and said in surprise, "This handsome guy, you know me?" "It's me, I'm Xia. I quickly explained, but I forgot. This is Hongsuan, 13 years ago. Master Za doesn't know me now, and he even mistook me for the foolish son of the big pig farmer from the neighboring village. He was planning to overcharge me." I explained with a wry smile, "Excuse me, master. I'm just a small researcher from the provincial archaeological team. Let me officially introduce myself. My name is Xia. I'm a poor guy who can't even afford to give you a red envelope." Master Za sighed in frustration and slapped his forehead. "Does that mean I saved you for nothing? What bad luck, another day of doing good deeds for free. When will I ever get rich?" As he said this, he clasped his hands behind his head. Then he walked ahead, out of the bamboo forest. The setting sun stretches his shadow long, so long. Looking at his back, I softly think to myself, I'm so glad I met you. Master Za is still as mischievous as ever. "Kid, aren't you leaving? Wait a bit longer, and some dirty things might come out. I really can't be bothered to save you." Just as I was lost in thought, Master Za suddenly turned around and shouted, "Coming." I immediately took a big step forward and caught up. Then, we started to laugh and joke around like before. This feeling, I hadn't experienced it in a long time. Since Master Za fell unconscious, 2 flowers bloom, each telling its own story. Meanwhile, the village chief and the others had already arrived at Gooden's house. Dog Dan is still unconscious in bed. His mother is just crying non-stop. His father, feeling guilty, said to the village head, "It's all my fault. Yesterday, I hired a shaman for Dog Dan to do a floating water ritual. I never expected it to go so wrong." At this moment, the fat man leaning against the altar, laughed out loud, saying, "What shaman? That's just a load of crap. That so-called shaman is nothing but nonsense. It's all a lie." Before the words were even finished, there was a loud bang. A talisman burst through the door. With a sharp snap, it was perfectly stuck to the fat man's head. After the talisman was attached, the fat man immediately became mute, unable to say a word. At that moment, I followed Master Za and pushed the door open. "Don't panic, you're making too much noise. I heard your pig calling from outside. That must have strained your throat. Let me help you rest. Am I the fraud you mentioned?" Then he pointed his head at me. He laughed and said, "I just helped you burn this on the way. Silly son, no need to thank me, just pay me." At that moment, I was startled. After carefully observing, I realized this seems to be my home. Looking at the dog lying on the bed, this was the old me. Then I quickly calmed down. This is Master Za's conscious world. It must be different from the real world. Maybe this is also related to the clue to awaken Master Za. Looking at the dog lying on the bed, Zhao Wenbin quickly calmed down the excited father of Guden. He explained that it was caused by evil energy entering the body. Drinking the floating water only made those evil spirits more hostile. He then turned to the others and said that if they wanted to save Guden, they needed to find the evil presence in the general's temple as soon as possible. They should go to the temple at midnight tonight to assess the situation. He casually pointed, and the rune on his forehead flew back into the air. At this point, was somewhat convinced. He quickly said, "I'll go investigate too." The general's temple was originally our archaeological team's assignment. Master Za didn't pay any attention. He simply pushed open the door and went out. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly turned back. With a wicked smile, he said, "Good. Hongsuan's classic tourist project, Night Exploration of the General's Temple, is now launched. I hope you leaders will enjoy yourselves tonight." Why won't Shi Chan's bleeding stop? Who is the mysterious corpse, and who returned from 13 years ago to try to save Master Za? How should the next move be handled? Please watch this episode's eerie corpse. The next morning, they notified the village chief and called the police. Soon, they arrived in the village with a team. They opened the temple door. They let the forensic doctor uncover the layer of wax on site. Opening it up, inside was indeed the corpse of an elderly man, exposed to the night air. His skin had begun to blacken. The leader of the archaeological team arrived early that morning, to take the body back for expert examination. They would also take the coffin. Za Wenbin advised them against taking everything away. He casually said that these 2 items are deeply cursed. If they are taken directly, something bad will happen on the way. The fat guy, who had experienced Za Wenbin's power last night, began to respectfully ask the so-called divine trickster, Abu, "Master Za, what should we do with that sword now?" Za Wenbin hadn't slept all night. He was exhausted. Yawning, he said, "Unless I completely remove the evil spirit from the temple, the coffin cannot leave the village." I stared intently at the body and asked, "What exactly is the origin of these things?" Za Wenbin walked up to the wall of the main hall. He carefully studied the writing on the wall and explained, I have some guesses, but I'm not sure yet. The ancient script on the wall should be describing the whereabouts of a strange book. He looked up at the higher part of the text. The book is called the Rui Manual. Its owner is Monk Danzi. It is said that he was taught by an immortal from Yunmeng Mountain. He learned the magic in the book. The immortal later passed the book on to him. This book is a secret manual of heavenly craftsmanship. It mainly teaches the art of miraculous transformations. Upon hearing this, I exclaimed in surprise, it's actually the Rui catalog. 13 years ago, Master Cha was only in a coma after falling off a cliff at Qingqing Mountain because he was searching for him. The chubby guy beside us also chimed in, saying, so the owner of this temple is Master Danzi. Isn't this a Taoist temple? That's just the title. It said that after he completed his studies, he became one of the ancestors of the Maoshan sect. Zhao Wenbin continued, this Taoist temple was most likely built by Monk Danzi. It was not until the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom period that the Qinglian sect migrated here. To prevent being exterminated by the Qin court at the time, they renamed this place as General's Temple. Suddenly, the fat man seemed to have thought of something. The one in the coffin might be Monk Dantu. I glanced at the coffin. It probably has a history of nearly 1,000 years. The Qinglian sect is only a little over 100 years old now. Zhao Wenbing seemed to be pondering something. He mumbled something unclear. We can't turn it on or off yet. Just then, an expert, not the typical expert type, suddenly appeared next to us. He shouted loudly, spewing nonsense. Pull the coffin back to the province. The expert will know at a glance whether he's qualified to play tricks and remove it. Fatty saw his superior getting angry. He quickly tried to persuade him. But after all, it was Fatty's superior. He was scolded and could only meekly agree, watching them clean up all this mess. I asked Zhao Wenbin, Master Zha, shall we just let them take it away? Zhao Wenbin responded nonchalantly, can we stop them? Then he confidently looked toward the door. They'll come back. The archaeological team forcibly took away the body for autopsy and the coffin, but they mysteriously got into a car accident on the way. What exactly is at work here? Please stay tuned for this episode's Daojing Master Should Have. Continuing from the previous episode, after leaving the general's temple, I followed Master Jia to his house. I explained to Master Jia that although I was also a member of the archaeology team, I couldn't stop them from taking away the body and the coffin. Master Jia took a sip of tea, and smiled, showing understanding. After all, does a higher-ranking official have the power to crush others? Then we started talking about the strange scene from last night. I asked Master Jia if he noticed anything unusual at the temple last night. Jia Wenbing said he sensed a trace of Taoist power in the temple. It was sealing an evil spirit inside, but that power was already weakening. We need to resolve this before the evil spirit breaks the seal. I immediately asked when we should take action. Master Jia told me he was waiting for a magic artifact. As soon as he finished speaking, a sound came from outside the door. Zhao Wenbing looked towards the door. It turned out to be Aunt Fu. Her voice preceded her arrival. Then she pushed the door open and entered. I looked toward the door. The god of fortune was holding an ancient-looking wooden box in his left hand, and holding a round, chubby, very cute little girl in his right hand. I was still wondering who they were. Zhao Wenbin saw the girl next to him, and quickly stepped forward to ask, Lingling, why did you come too? Looking at the little girl, I suddenly realized, isn't this Lingling when she was younger? Aunt Fu smiled and explained, Lingling knew I was bringing you something, and insisted on coming to see you. She handed over the box. Lingling pouted beside her, angrily shouting, Dad is a bad guy. He promised to take me to the city to see my brother today, and he broke his promise. He didn't keep his word. Zhao Wenbin took the box. With a flattering expression, he told Lingling that after he finishes work today, he'll go visit her brother over the weekend. This time, Dad absolutely won't lie to you. Lingling heard that Master Jia had agreed to it. Her expression changed instantly. Really? But you're always so busy every day. Master Jia quickly crouched down. He gently patted Lingling's little head as she looked up. He said with a confident smile, this time, Dad won't lie to you. All right, Lingling said with an expression that seemed to say, I forgive you. Then I'll trust you one last time. I watched Master Jia holding the wooden box in his hand. I couldn't help but ask, Master Jia, is this the magical item you had someone bring from home? Master Jia turned to look at me, and said proudly, that's right. Lingling, who was nearby, heard my voice, and turned around curiously to look at me. She asked Master Jia, who is this uncle? I bent down, and gave what I thought was a friendly smile. I told Lingling my name is Swixiai, and I'm an archaeologist. Lingling was also imitating the adults. She smiled and cheerfully replied, hello, my name is Cha Ling, just call me Lingling. Lingling was really cute when she was little. By the way, a father with a daughter is definitely not to be messed with. I underestimated Master Jia's protective power over his little girl. I just told Lingling. It was less than 3 sentences in total. Master Jia grabbed me from behind. He strangled me by the neck from behind. His eyes were bloodshot. His face showed a fierce expression. He fiercely warned me, "Kid, don't use that trick on my daughter again. Come and see my treasure." I was so scared that I quickly replied, "All right." Zhao Wenbin placed the wooden box on the table. With a clink, he opened it. Inside the box was a large seal. The seal was made of bronze. It was about the size of an adult's palm. It was engraved with the words, Dao Jin Shirbao. Then he tilted his head back and laughed wildly. With him, even a 1,000-year-old demon will be reduced to ashes tonight. At that moment, a startled cry came from outside the door. "Master, Master, it's terrible." Then, the door was thrown open with a bang. A chubby figure darted in. We looked towards the door. It was Fatty. One Fatty was sweating profusely. He gasped for breath. Speaking intermittently, the people from the Cultural Relics Bureau had a car accident on their way back with the coffin. Master Cha quickly asked, "Were there any casualties?" Fatty continued, "No, not really. Everyone just fainted. The coffin is temporarily stored in a house in the village." The fat man nervously stared at Cha Wenbin and asked, "Master, did you know all along? What should we do now?" Cha Wenbin didn't rush to answer. Making a mysterious gesture with his hand, he calculated with his fingers, calmly saying, "The coffin is the main body of the evil spirit in the temple. The evil spirit is still here. Therefore, the coffin won't go far. Today is the 15th day of the lunar month. You should call a few more people. Tonight, at the hour of the rat, we will enter the temple to eliminate the demon." What exactly is the strange black shadow that appeared in the general's temple? Why did the black dog keep barking at it? Stay tuned for this episode of The Terrifying General. In the blink of an eye, it is already night. The fat man found the village chief. He gathered a few young, strong men. They were all armed. Master Jia and we arrived at the general's temple. The wind howled. The main hall's doors were tightly shut. It stood there like a fierce beast choosing its prey. Silently, it loomed. Wenbin stopped before the temple gate. He turned around. He solemnly warned the villagers. After entering the temple, follow my instructions exactly. The evil spirits are already alert. There will be a fierce battle tonight. Then he pushed open the temple doors. After entering the main hall, Zhao Wenbin arranged 7 people to sit inside the temple. Following the pattern of the Big Dipper, 2 hunters stood guard at the door, and 2 butchers stood beside him. Zhao Wenbin then gave each person a talisman, instructing them that if they sense danger approaching, they should not hesitate. Light the talisman immediately. This heavenly master talisman is for saving your life. A normal person can only use it once in their lifetime. It is used to summon heavenly soldiers, to protect you from a demonic invasion. Then the black dog nearby started barking. It seemed to be saying it wanted a place for itself too. Zhao Wenbing seemed to be easing everyone's tension. I patted the black dog's head and said, "Haizi, don't rush, it's not your turn yet." I looked at Master Jia with concern. "Be careful." Zhao Wenbin looked at me, and gave me a reassuring smile. He smiled and said, "Don't worry. The silly kid, Lingling, is still waiting for me to come back. I value my life more than you do." Saying that, he began setting things up again. Once everything was set, he took out the 3 clear spirits from his bag. He began casting a spell. With a soft clang, Zhao Wenbing held the arm evil spirit, shaking it while chanting the heavenly general demon subduing spell. Heaven and earth, nature's dark energy disperses. The mysterious and bright light within the cave. Taiyuan's 8 directions, mighty spirits. Cause my natural spiritual treasure to subdue. I command, announcing to the 9 heavens. Zhongshan's incantation, the original jade text, I hold and recite once. To ward off illness and prolong life. The secret text that traverses the 5 mountains and 8 seas. The demon king stands by, waiting. I declare that the chest will dissipate. The Tao energy will remain. I begin to walk in circles around this small general's temple. Every 3 circles, Zhao Wenbing throws a piece of yellow paper. He continues to chant, brushing, and casually tosses it. Runes scattered all over the sky. He shouted loudly, quickly, as the order dictates. Suddenly, there was a whoosh sound. A noise came from the beams of the hall. It startled both me and Fatty. Zhao Wenbin suddenly opened his eyes. The talisman in his hand was suddenly thrown toward the southeast corner. Then the candle in the corner went out with a soft puff. Zhao Wenbin shouted loudly. He immediately drew the 7-star sword, and rushed toward the corner. Before anyone could react, a black shadow darted out of the corner in a flash. It charged straight for the door, trying to escape. The black dog beside Zhao Wenbin dashed forward in an instant. The hunter standing at the door was quick-witted and fast. Before Zhao Wenbing could speak, the 2 of them raised their guns and fired 2 quick shots. These 2 were experts at shooting flying birds on a regular basis. After the 2 gunshots, the shadow actually dodged the bullets. It then quickly darted to the northwest corner. Next, it climbed up to the roof along the rafters. Zhao Wenbin narrowed his eyes, staring upwards. He thought, if I don't deal with you today, I fear many more innocent people will fall victim here. The two hunters raised their guns, intending to shoot again, but Zhao Wenbin stopped them. He shook his head, meaning it was useless. He said, stepping on the Bagua formation, and pulled out a Daoist treasure, Bao Ying, from his hand, heavily pressing down on a divine talisman. The seven-star sword casually picks up the talisman covered with a large seal. He shouts loudly, shameless beast, how dare you? After saying this, he raises the seven-star sword he holds. He makes a hand gesture, incanting a spell. With a whoosh, the seven-star sword stabs towards the dark shadow on the rafter. A crack is heard. Sparks fly, a painful cry. A pained roar came from the rafters. It was excruciatingly loud. Then, with a thud, the seven-star sword fell to the ground. It landed firmly there. The black shadow's wails echoed from all directions. It must have been wounded by the seven-star sword. All of us were extremely tense at that moment. Han Zi nervously spoke from behind, Master Zha. Isn't the wind a little strange? Why am I so cold? At that moment, Zhao Wenbing's face suddenly changed. He shouted urgently, this is bad. Quick, ignite your Tianshifu. He's about to make a move. Do you know the real Maoshan magic? The magical battle formation creates soldiers, crushing the waste. The seven-star formation displays its divine power. Please watch this episode's Taoist magic from Maoshan, the formation that creates soldiers. Picking up from where we left off, we arrived at the general's temple at midnight. We set up the formation to break the evil spirits. Halfway through, Zhao Wenbing's expression suddenly changed. He shouted loudly, not good. Quick, light your heavenly master talismans. He's going to take advantage of the chaos and escape. His shout was incredibly loud, instantly waking up everyone present. Suddenly, 11 talismans were lit at once. Just as they were lit, it was still a night with the moon hanging high. Suddenly, a rumbling thunderclap echoed. Then, a flash of lightning seemed to split the general's temple in two. We looked over, and Master Zha had fallen to the ground, spitting out a mouthful of blood. He mumbled, it's ruined. The 11 talismans of the Taoist master were ignited together. The power it brought backfired too strongly. I nervously asked, Master Zha, are you alright? Zhao Wenbing turned around and shouted, sit down. We were so scared that we quickly sat in our positions according to the formation. After wiping his mouth, the Taoist master stood up and smiled, saying, this monster can no longer threaten them. Now, let me have a word with you. Zhao Wenbing scattered the soybeans with one throw. Then he took out a handful of small chess pieces. He arranged them according to the directions of the Bagua. This is called scattering beans to form an army. It is also a common technique used by the Maoshan sect. At this moment, it seemed as though everyone else had already entered a meditative state. According to their recollections afterward, after lighting the celestial master talisman, I felt like my body was no longer under my control. My consciousness started to blur, until I woke up the next day. Back to the main topic. At the same time that Zhao Wenbing struggled with the formation, at that moment, the candle in the northwest corner also went out. Zhao Wenbing picked up the seven-star sword. With a whoosh, it stabbed toward that corner. A roar echoed back. It struck, and then a figure slowly emerged. A beastly face. Its eyes were red and hollow. Its mouth full of sharp teeth. Its legs long and spiked. Its body lacked claws, but was covered in fur. He roared, his eyes fixed on Zhao Wenbing. Zhao Wenbing didn't dodge. He shouted, Demon Beast, do you recognize this seal? Having said that, Zhao Wenbing raised the Heavenly Master Righteous Path seal in his hand. Suddenly, the monster spoke, Zhao Wenbing, I have no grievance with you. Why do you insist on killing me? The sound was incredibly grating. It made my teeth ache. The black dog beside Zhao Wenbin could no longer contain itself. It kicked off its hind legs, shooting out like an arrow. Immediately, it became entangled with the monster, seeing itself surrounded. The monster used its agility to its advantage. It shot up the pillar, and disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the black dog circling the pillar endlessly, but to no avail. I've already destroyed the beast's lair. It certainly won't give up easily. It must be waiting in the shadows for a chance to catch me off guard. Sure enough, with a whoosh, a large dark shadow shot out from the beam. It went straight for Zhao Wenbin's head. Zhao Wenbin was already prepared. He dodged, but a scratch mark was still left on his face. Then it hit and left. In midair, it turned around. It viciously glared at Zhao Wenbin. It was as if he was provoking him. Zhao Wenbing touched the scratch, still oozing blood. He thought for a moment and said, not bad. A single scratch. If it were you, it'd cost the life of a beast. Very reasonable. He then raised the seal. He chanted an exorcism incantation. Taishan Lao Jun, teach me to slay demons. With my divine spell, I call upon the Jade Maiden to subdue the unknown. This monster seems to understand human speech. Upon hearing the incantation, it immediately went berserk and charged outwards. It didn't even care about the soybeans. After several charges, the formation of soybeans seemed somewhat disrupted. It seemed that no matter how hard it tried, it couldn't break through. He snarled, glaring fiercely at Cha Wenbin. "You're so vicious. You deliberately exposed a flaw. You lured me into the trap." At this moment, Cha Wenbin raised the seal high with his left hand. His right hand formed a sword with his fingers. He made a gesture with a divine talisman. With a sinister smile, he said, "Don't be in such a hurry. The worst is yet to come. Slay the evil spirits. Seal the soul." Can Cha Wenbin break the fate and save himself? Please watch this episode, The Microcosm of the Lousy Statue. The sword scatters, turning the soldiers into warriors, trapping the monster. Cha Wenbin continued chanting the exorcism spell. "In the name of the highest, with bloodless succession, I will extinguish your obsession. I will drive away your hatred. Without wisdom, then." Cha Wenbin shouted loudly. The seal was heavily stamped onto the divine talisman. The monster seemed to understand human speech. It seemed to realize that this spell was a super powerful move. It went into a frenzy, trying to break free and escape. But Zhao Bing sneered and said, "You're not escaping tonight." The young man then threw the talisman at the monster. With a swoosh, a bright light appeared behind the monster. It was tearing at the monster, pulling it in. The monster's feet scraped the ground, leaving deep furrows. But it still couldn't resist the tearing force. Just as the monster was about to be torn apart and pulled into the sealing talisman, Zhao Wenbing knelt down. Then he collapsed onto the ground, unable to move. It turned out that after a night of setting up formations and casting spells, he was completely exhausted. At this moment, Zhao Wenbing couldn't even lift a finger. And at the moment when Zhao Wenbing fell, the magic circle also went out. The monster fell out again, covered in blood, gloomy and terrifying. It made strange screeching sounds. I didn't expect it. In the end, Zhao Wenbing still fell to my final move. After all, I have to pay with my life. Zhao Wenbing expected that he might not walk out of this general's temple today. Just as the monster closed in step by step on Zhao Wenbing, there was still a painting of the Supreme Laozi in the temple that reminded Zhao Wenbing. Zhao Wenbing used the last bit of his strength, struggling to crawl in front of the painting. He spat a mouthful of blood onto Laozi's painting. Strangely enough, after the blood sprayed out, the incense in front of the Big Dipper formation burned even more fiercely. A surge of righteous energy suddenly filled the entire hall. At this moment, Heizi also charged forward with full force. With its mouth holding the monster, it tore into it frantically, pulling and tearing at it, venting all its fury on this monster. All that remained was the pitiful sound of roaring. Meanwhile, Zhao Wenbin gradually recovered some strength. He shakily stood up, leaning on his sword. He looked towards the Lao Jun statue. He muttered, "It can't be wrong. The Taoist power I sensed in the temple earlier indeed came from the Lao Jun statue." The old man with a white beard who appeared the first time I entered the temple was a phantom of Lao Jun. He appeared to stop me from opening the coffin, because opening the coffin would have been certain death. "Master, you've saved my life twice." He then moved the 7-star sword to the center of the great hall, beside the dismembered corpse of the monster. Heizi also sat quietly beside him. Zhao Wenbing quietly stared at the monster's corpse. Suddenly, he raised the 7-star sword high. He shouted angrily, "You wicked creature, when you committed your evil deeds, did you ever think about sparing those innocent villagers? With one strike, I cleaved this demonic marrow that had harmed countless people. Is it truly and completely gone now? Only a pool of chicken powder remains on the ground." At that moment, the formation dissipated. We slowly regained consciousness. We still didn't know what had happened. Seeing Zhao Nine kneeling with an arrow in his leg, I rushed over anxiously. "Master Zha, are you alright?" It wasn't until I got closer that I saw there was a pool of blood on the floor. I asked in confusion, "What is this?" Zhao Wenbing, breathing heavily, explained, "The remains of the demonic creature in the room. It is the manifestation of the courtyard spirit. The exact origin will only be known after opening the coffin. There is also a cultural relics bureau in Gooden village. The people who were unconscious should wake up by tomorrow morning. You saved so many of your leaders this time, so the payment can't be less." Suddenly, I saw a shadow behind me coming down toward Zhao Wenbing. "Be careful," I shouted loudly. Before I could push him away, Zhao Wenbing twisted his body. With a mysterious step, he dodged backward. It turned out to be the fatty with a shovel in his hand. At this moment, his eyes were bloodshot. He made sounds that were neither human nor ghostly. "Zhao Wenbin, you've ruined my 1,000 years of cultivation. I will make you pay the price." Zhao Wenbin also noticed the fat guy's strange behavior. He explained, "This wretch's resentment is so strong. He's barely holding on, not letting go. It's attached itself to this dead fat guy." Then he bit his index finger. He quickly drew a talisman on a piece of yellow paper. The fat man's next attack came. He raised his shovel high towards Master Zha. I quickly and nervously shouted, "Master Zha, He's behind you. As soon as I finished speaking, Master Jia just happened to be crouching down. He smashed the talisman onto the fat man's belly. The talisman ensured the fat man could no longer move. Come on, I'll send you on your final journey. Zhao Wenbing muttered to himself. Then, he took out the seal. With a loud slap, he pressed it onto the fat man's round face. Immediately, an afterimage was ripped from the fat man's body. The fat man fell to the ground with a thud. I hurried over to support him. But the afterimage slowly dissipated in the air. A ghostly voice came from Zabenbing. I offer my remaining soul as a sacrifice. I curse you. You will forever lose what you cherish most. At this moment, Zabenbing froze. What I cherish most? No. Lingling. Though capable of slaying evil spirits, he was cursed and lost his beloved. Can Zhao Wenbin save his beloved daughter, Lingling? Please watch this episode, The Cursed Lingling. Continuing from the last episode, after the evil spirit in the general's temple was destroyed by Zhao Wenbin, it cursed Zhao Wenbin's poisoned daughter, Lingling, using its remaining soul. At this moment, Zhao Wenbin can think of nothing else. I hurriedly followed them home. I quickly chased after them. At Chia Wenbin's house, Lingling had already gone to bed early since we were out to exorcise evil spirits that night. She was sleeping alone at the time, but she was having a nightmare. Her face was twisted. She was mumbling, "Daddy." Suddenly, there was a whoosh in the room. Lingling opened her eyes. She thought it was her father returning, but what appeared before her was the last wisp of the monster's soul. A gaping maw, with bloodshot eyes, hung upside down less than an inch above Lingling. Lingling opened her eyes, and saw this sight. It was as if everything had been drained out of her. Her pupils suddenly dilated. She screamed out in terror. Her soul seemed to have left her body. We rushed over as well, just in time to hear Lingling's scream. Zhao Wenbin was jolted. He immediately slammed the door open and rushed inside, shouting, "Lingling." Meanwhile, inside the room, Lingling fell to the ground, lying face down, motionless. Zhao Wenbin rushed over, quickly picking her up and holding her in his arms. Lingling's eyes were vacant. This was clearly a sign of losing one's soul. Lingling's father returned. "Wake up." Zhao Wenbin kept shaking Lingling, shouting out loud, but there was no response at all. I also checked his nose with my hand. Vital signs are normal, but his soul had already left his body. When I rushed in, Zhao Wenbin was sitting on the ground, holding Lingling in his arms. "Master Jia, what's wrong with Lingling?" Zhao Wenbin was completely lost at this moment. He placed Lingling on the bed and ignored me. He simply said lightly, Xia, go out and stand guard for me. I need to perform a soul summoning for Lingling." But I still wanted to say something. Wenbin's shout interrupted me. I'd never heard such a cold tone before. I was thrown out of the room. With a bang, the door slammed shut. I stared at the door, sighing. Sure enough, it happened again this time. Inside, Wenbin had already set up a spirit calling array, using Lingling's bed as the focal point of the ritual. White candles, red string, and a soul calling bell. 3 sticks of incense to guide the soul home. Then, Zhao Wenbing began to chant the incantation to summon the soul. The soul calling bell moved on its own without any wind. It jingled. "Soul, return. Return to your eternal rest. What is the resting place of the 4 directions? Your place of joy. Grand and majestic, the details are unclear. Rest your soul and return." The East cannot be hastily written. Just as he hadn't finished reciting it for the 3rd time, a gust of cold wind extinguished the candle. With a whoosh, the incantation was broken. Wenbin collapsed, screaming loudly, "Not caring about my daughter. Nothing will happen." Then, as if driven mad, he bit his finger. He wrote talisman after talisman. The Supreme rescues the suffering. Boundless magic power. Heaven and earth, may the bad luck disperse a little. The 3 souls from the previous life are returning to their rightful place. Unfortunately, despite that, Ling still didn't react, and I don't know when. I had quietly entered the room. Master Jia's efforts were in vain. Zhao Wenbin seemed to have lost his soul. He murmured to himself, "I don't believe it." Yet his hand still wielded the divine axe. I suddenly couldn't hold back. I rushed forward and hugged Master Jia. I shouted angrily, "Even if you write your finger to the bone today, even if you bleed dry, Lingling will never write again." Zhao Wenbing shoved me away. He muttered angrily, "You're talking nonsense. Lingling won't leave me." But his body staggered and fell forward. He kept muttering, "Lingling, come back." Why did Lingling's soul appear in the endless purgatory? Can Yang Tongyuan and Zhao Wenbin save his beloved daughter Lingling? Find out in this episode of Yang Tongyuan. In the pitch-black night, Zhao Wenbin suddenly heard someone calling him, "Father." "Father." Zhao Wenbin felt a moment of bewilderment. He seemed to hear a voice calling him, "Father. Father, I'm so scared. Come save me." Cha Wenbin looked closely. Not far away is a building that looks like a grand hall. Below it is a small pond. Moonlight is reflected in the center of the pond. From time to time, ripples spread out. They scatter and then gather the moonlight, gathering and scattering again. It seems that a small hand is disturbing the moonlight. It's still swaying in the water. Daddy, hurry and save me. I'm so scared. Lingling, don't be afraid. Daddy's here. He responded while searching through the darkness. Suddenly, a blinding red light appeared ahead. Upon closer inspection, the three characters Yang Tongyuan appeared before his eyes. Zhao Wenbin felt a surge of pain in his heart. Yang Tongyuan was like the endless hell of the 18 levels, tormented by true fire. How could Lingling be here? But no matter how hard Zhao Wenbin tried, there was a barrier in front of him. He couldn't move forward. Zhao Wenbin kept pounding on the invisible barrier, blood streaming from the head, kneeling on the ground, crying bitterly. How could Lingling be here suffering? The sound of footsteps approached from the front. Zhao Wenbin suddenly looked up. It was Lingling, her face expressionless, her eyes vacant. She murmured, "Daddy, why didn't you save me?" That familiar voice still echoed in my ears. Zhao Wenbin could no longer move. He collapsed in front of the stone tablet. The moment his eyes closed, he clearly saw a giant beast. The Taotai slowly emerged from behind Lingling. It opened its huge, blood-red mouth and swallowed Lingling whole. Zhao Wenbin's eyes widened in anger. Tears of blood burst forth. He shouted loudly. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open. He suddenly sat up. It turned out to be a dream. I was beside Zhao Wenbin's bed, concerned as I said, "Master Zha, you've finally woken up. He's been unconscious for 5 days." I tried talking to Zhao Wenbin, but he ignored me. He kept muttering, "No. It's impossible, it's Taotai, the legendary beast that devours human souls." I anxiously watched him. "Master Zha, are you having a nightmare?" Zhao Wenbin rolled over and got out of bed. He took the big seal from the box on the table. He insisted, still muttering, "I'm going to save Lingling. She's waiting for me." Seeing Master Zha like this, I couldn't help myself. He pointed at Lingling on the bed and shouted, "Lingling is right here. Where are you going to save her?" "No, her soul is locked in Yang Tongyuan, never to be reincarnated again." Having said that, he collapsed into the chair. The great seal in his hand slipped and fell. I leapt forward. Fortunately, I caught it. "This is the great seal of the Tianjin sect." Zhao Wenbin said, his soul lost. "So what? He couldn't save Lingling either." I argued, "But you saved so many people using him." Zhao Wenbin hung his head. He seemed to be reminiscing. He mumbled, "Saved so many people. Yes, it was my responsibility. I was raised by my master since I was young. Before he passed away, he passed the Changjiao teachings on to me. I am the last disciple of the Tianjin sect of the Maoshan school." He closed his eyes in pain. Then he said, "My master raised me. It is the responsibility of the sect leader to care for me. This is a debt of duty and gratitude. I can't even die." I roared at him in uncontrollable anger, "You actually want to die? Can you live with yourself?" I haven't finished speaking. Zhao Wenbin glared angrily. He loudly interrupted me, "What's wrong with dying? Who do I need to answer to? My master, the villagers of Hongsuan, or the people I am meant to protect?" Then, with a self-mocking, almost insane laugh, he said, "Ha ha ha. I have answered to them. But the one person I can't answer to is Lingling." As he spoke, Zhao Wenbin drew the 7-star sword from the table. He held it in his hand. The cold, snow-like blade reflected Zhao Wenbin's desolate eyes. "I've harmed my daughter. That demon was originally trying to get revenge on me. It should be me lying here." At this point, he raised the sword, ready to take his own life. I lunged forward. I grabbed her sword hand and threw it aside. I grabbed her by the collar roughly. I shouted at her, "Coward! What's the point of wanting to die? If you have the guts, wake Lingling up." I punched him in the face. I wanted to knock some sense into him. "This is all fake. Stop right there." Zhao Wenbing's blade was tearing at me. I spoke helplessly. "Lingling is in Yang Tongyuan. She cannot die." I heard this and quickly shouted to interrupt him. "This is all your fantasy. The real Lingling." Before I could finish speaking, a sudden headache hit me. So painful I couldn't speak. A pain that pierced my heart. A soul-wrenching agony. Master Zha seemed to regain his senses slightly. See me crouching on the ground, clutching my head in pain. "You asked me what was wrong. It seems I can't say it directly. I'd be killed by his consciousness. I can only let him realize it himself." Then I extended my arm, revealing the inscribed rune. "Do you recognize this rune?" Zhao Wenbing glanced at it. He seemed to have no recollection of what kind of incantation it was. "I've never seen it before." "This is yours. It hurts." Another wave of pain came. Master Zha didn't look at me. He walked out, dejected. "Xia Yi, you don't need to persuade me. I just want to be alone for a while. Don't worry, I'm not worth dying for yet." Watching Master Zha's lonely figure, I couldn't help but think it's all because of me. Master Zha saved me from drowning, and put 5-year-old Lingling on the shore. That's when the accident happened. I should be the one responsible for this. Master Jia spent 10 years in the real world looking for the Rui strategy to save Lingling. Yes, the Rui strategy. Thinking about this, I got excited. This might be a chance to awaken Master Jia. Then I stood up and shouted to Jia Wenbin, didn't you say the Rui strategy is a Heavenly Palace secret manual? Is there always a way to immerse Yang Tongyuan? Upon hearing this, Jia Wenbin suddenly turned to look at me. His eyes seemed to finally show a hint of light. The Taoist Heavenly Palace Secret Manual, the Rui Book, contains secret methods to ascend to the heavens and descend to the earth. Will Jia Wenbin be able to successfully find the manual and save the queen? Please follow the clues in this episode's Underground Palace storyline. Just as Jia Wenbin was wallowing in self-pity, I thought of using the Rui Book to get his attention. Sure enough, he turned his head and looked at me. Let's go try to find the Rui Book. Great. And at this moment, there was a hurried sound of footsteps outside the door. It turned out that Dog Dan had woken up. Dog Dan's parents brought him along with a basket of fruit to thank Jia Wenbin for saving his life. And at this moment, I saw Dog Dan. That is, me as a child. Thinking back, I did indeed come looking for Master Jia when I was a child, but I was turned away. I can't help but wonder how things will play out in his subconscious this time. Go Dan walks forward carrying a basket of fruit. Master Jia, thank you for saving me. If it weren't for you, I'm sure I've been killed by a monster. And Lingling also lowered her head as she spoke. The sound from behind was barely audible. With a loud bang, the door slammed shut. Only Go Dan and her parents were left, staring at each other. I looked at Jia Wenbin, who was leaning against the door inside the room, and somewhat dejectedly asked, Master Jia, are you blaming Dog Dan? If it wasn't to save him. He interrupted me before I could finish my sentence. Stop, I know already. Master Jia must regret saving me. Bang, bang, bang. Another round of urgent knocking on the door. Jia Wenbin thought it was Dog Dan and his parents knocking again. He yanked open the door and shouted, who's there? I didn't tell you. Before I could finish, a large, round face squeezed through the crack in the door. Master Heiza. I heard you woke up on the way. So I came to see you. It's the fat guy from the archaeological team. When Jia Wenbin saw it was a fat man, he didn't say anything. He pushed him outside with one hand. He was about to close the door. The fat man quickly grabbed the door tightly. He explained, there's something to discuss. Stop with the pushing and shoving. I came to ask you to help us find the tomb beneath the general's temple. Jia Wenbin, hearing what the fat man said, furrowed his brows slightly and asked. The underground palace. The fat man saw an opportunity, quickly continued to explain, while you were unconscious these past few days, the coffin was transported back to the province and opened by experts. Inside was a corpse from the Qing dynasty, wearing a Taoist robe. Beside it was the corpse of a black cat. You got everything right before. Experts also believe that it was the heretical Qinglian sect. They sought refuge in the general's temple 100 years ago. They seized the original owner's coffin. They sealed the original owner's body inside the wall. I quickly asked, what about the black cat? The fat man scratched his head sheepishly and said, the expert didn't mention it, they don't deal with ghosts and gods. Zaunbin hung his head beside me, speaking in a tone that's hard to discern. It seems the black hat must have accidentally slipped in, and absorbed the Taoist's evil thoughts. The corpse in the wall very likely is Master Tanzi. The underground tomb was probably built by him as well. Hearing this, the quickly responded, but the entrance to the underground tomb isn't in the temple. We searched for several days without finding anything. Please, Master, help us. I'll help you find. Before I finished speaking, Jia Wenbin readily agreed. Excellent. I'll go get someone. The fat man, like a taking-off elephant, rushed out of the house. I watched Jia Wenbin with a growing sense of unease. I thought you would refuse. Jia Wenbin stared blankly at the direction where the fat man had gone. He muttered that if the underground palace was what the monk Bonsai had seen, then it's highly likely that the Rui book is inside the underground palace. Is the Rui book really in the underground palace? What challenges will Jia Wenbin and the others face next? Can Jia Wenbin rescue Lingling? Jia Wenbin led everyone to the underground palace, and discovered the dense treasure boxes, but it was recklessly opened by the fat man. It has turned to ashes. Please watch the intensive treasure box of this episode. In ancient times, temples or pagodas would usually have an underground chamber to bury scriptures and offerings. Some temples would also enshrine relics. Although this is a general's temple, it can now be confirmed that the general's temple is Taoist. The house was built, and it's likely that the Taoist secrets to save Lingling are hidden in the tomb. As predicted, the fat man immediately returned to arrange for everyone to begin exploring the tomb. Soon, everything was ready. Jia Wenbin led the group up a mountain opposite the general's temple. Standing on the mountaintop, they looked down. They saw a winding stream flowing out from the west. Here, it formed a confluence. This is the legendary dragon's water source. To the east, a mountain range stretches for thousands of miles, with towering peaks. But here, the mountain suddenly lowers in height. It plunges into the earth. It's as if the head of a giant dragon suddenly lowers. This is the water source. 2 dragons come here to drink. One can imagine how extraordinary the feng shui of this water source must be. Take another look at the ruins of the general's temple. A huge turtle leaps onto the ground. The turtle's head is pointing towards that small pond. Zhao Wenbing saw everyone standing there in a daze, and immediately asked, "Did you notice anything?" I answered from the side, "The small river to the west and the mountain range to the east both flow into this pond." I heard the locals say, "This pond is called the Dragon Pond." Zhao Wenbin then pointed towards the general's temple, gesturing for everyone to look. He explained, "The gate of the general's temple also directly faces the Dragon Pond. Doesn't it look like a giant turtle lying on the ground? And the turtle's head is pointing directly at that small pond." Everyone suddenly understood. They murmured in agreement, "Yes, yes. What does this mean?" The turtle dominates over the 2 water dragons and earth dragon. The 3 heads are simultaneously absorbing the true dragon energy from the dragon pool. This place is even suitable for burying an emperor. Then, Zhao Wenbin pointed in a direction and said, "If I'm not mistaken, the entrance to the underground palace should be near the dragon pool. Let's go down and take a look. It's easy to climb up, but hard to go down. Especially for a 200-pound fat guy. That makes it even harder." Soon, the fat guy, bringing up the rear. We arrived at a cave entrance. The fat guy planned to put the prepared live duck inside to scout the way first. Unexpectedly, Zhao Wenbing took the lead, walking into the cave by himself, explaining as he went, "This is a geomantic treasure land, absorbing the essence of the sun and moon. It won't gather." The cave filled with miasma was pitch black. Everyone switched on the headlamps they had prepared in advance. Fatty was still chattering away, saying that it didn't matter if the surname Zha wasn't afraid. "Xia Yi, you're part of the archaeological team. Don't you understand this basic principle? Shut up if you don't want to die." A voice came slowly from the front of the line, clearly exasperated by Fatty. Zhao Wenbin wanted to retort. I immediately gave him a gesture, because the miner's lamp in front shone on the cave ceiling, where countless bats were hanging upside down, resting. This scene immediately scared the fat man silent. He was afraid of making any sound. We continued walking inward. The further we went in, the eerie green glow intensified in the darkness. Zhao Wenbin ignored it. They soon stopped before a section of the cave wall. Zhao Wenbin explained, "We should be entering the burial chamber now." The space ahead suddenly opened up. A mural dominated the small space. It was magnificent. An old man was handing a book to a young man. The young man knelt respectfully before an elder. His hands were clasped together. I looked at the mural and asked, "This should be the Danzi monk, right?" Zhao Wenbin explained, "Correct. That's the Danzi monk depicted here." The book in his hand is the Rui scroll, passed down to him by the immortals of Yunmeng Mountain. Zhao Wenbin, who had been tense since Ot's birth, suddenly relaxed. I didn't expect the legends to be true. Fatty suddenly pointed at a box and said, "Look, there seems to be a box on that shrine." Zhao Wenbin walked over. He nervously looked at the box. In this large tomb, only this box remains. The Rui scroll must be in there. In this box. From the outside, it looks like a rosewood box. It has no locks. There are carvings of the Bagua on top. Zhao Wenbin always feels that something is off, but he can't quite explain it. He just sits there, eyes closed, thinking. Meanwhile, they can't wait any longer. "Master Zha, let me do it. This is a cultural relic. Don't damage it. I'm a professional." Saying that, he put on gloves. Before Zhang Wenbin could shout, "Wait," Fatty B had already opened the box. A burst of flames erupted from the box. His hand trembled involuntarily. The box fell to the ground. Instantly, it burned down to a pile of charcoal. Zhao Wenbin found the secret manual box, but it was opened by the clumsy fat man and burned to ashes. Can Zhao Wenbin successfully find the secret manual and save Lingling? Please watch this episode, The Mysterious Corpse. Zhao Wenbin led everyone to the underground palace, and discovered a cluster of treasure boxes, but they were recklessly opened by the fat man and burned to ashes. He fell into deep self-reproach. The fat man watched Zhao Wenbin kneeling on the ground, completely broken. He quickly apologized, frightened. After all, this might be an heirloom of the Taoist ancestors, and the Rui strategy was Zhao Wenbin's only hope of saving Lingling. Now it was destroyed by the fat man's own hands. Zhao Wenbin murmured in pain, "What's the use of apologizing now?" Suddenly, he turned around, and drew out the 7-star sword. He shouted, "Die, fatso! Pay me back the Rui book." With one swing, he struck at the fat man. The fat man was so scared, he ducked and ran. He repeatedly shouted, "Next, I." But at this moment, I was studying the ashes in the burning stove. "Stop fighting, come over here quickly." This box doesn't contain the Rui book. When they heard my voice, the two of them finally stopped. How did you know? I explained. Paper turns to ashes after burning. Look, there's only burnt wood in here. There was only some sulfur and cinnabar inside. Fatty Wong just triggered the mechanism. It was completely burned to ashes. Fatty wiped a cold sweat. He quickly continued, saying to Zhao Wenbin, that's right. That's right, it's a trick. Those Qingmian sect demons must have already taken the Rui book away. Zhao Wenbin investigated for a while. It was indeed the case. He then sheathed his sword, and walked forward. Let's go then. The fat man was still nervously asking me. I told him to stop whining, told him to be quiet for a while. Zhao Wenbin, who was walking in front, felt that we hadn't caught up. He turned around and shouted, stop dawdling, you two. Stay close, there's an eerie presence in this cave. Be careful, I quickly responded, okay. Master Zha quickly moved ahead. Just after walking for a short while, the fat man suddenly felt a chill on his back. He felt something dripping on his face. He wiped his hand across it. What is this? Before he could ask, I suddenly saw a shadow behind him. I screamed in fear. Behind you. Quickly turned around and looked up. He was so scared his soul nearly left his body. A terrifying, upside-down white-haired corpse. Green liquid still dripped from his eyes. Fatty's terrified yell was like stirring up a hornet's nest. The bats sleeping around them suddenly opened their eyes. Countless crimson bulbs lit up the cave instantly. Thickly packed. And at that moment, Zhao Wenbing roared, damn it. Quick, lie down and don't look up. We were so scared that we immediately did as told. We saw Zhao Wenbing form a spell gesture, invoking the Fire Star Lord. He used the three mysterious true fire. Then, he forcefully threw the talisman toward the cave ceiling. With a swish, a blaze of fire instantly engulfed the entire cave. Zhao Wenbing pulled us and immediately dashed toward the cave entrance. After escaping, the fatty and I were both horrified, wondering why there was a dry corpse hanging in the tunnel. Zhao Wenbing said it was most likely from a tomb raider who had disturbed the bats. The corpse was drained of blood and flesh. The corpse oil was green. It was caused by poisoning. Then he turned to the fatty and said, if it weren't for your pig-like scream, do you think the bats would have done this? Fatty felt wrong too. Actually, it's true. Anyone would be scared stiff seeing a corpse hanging on their face. It's lucky he wasn't scared to death. While we were arguing, Fatty suddenly remembered something. If Reyes really wanted to find him, he had an idea. Zhao Wenbin and I were also stunned. We asked the fat man what he thought, but the fat man pretended to be mysterious, keeping us in suspense and saying he'd tell us after we went down the mountain. What else would we encounter after going down the mountain? Could we find the Rui plan? Could Lingling be awakened? With the fat man's introduction, Zhao Wenbin and his group arrived at the voyage, searching for clues to the Rui book. What kind of adventures will they have next? Please watch this episode, The First Meeting with Old He. Under Wang Pengzi's arrangement, they took a car from Hongsuan to Hangzhou. Pengzi led them to a restaurant. After entering, he pointed to an elderly man sitting alone by the window, drinking tea, and explained, this is Old He. He Luowen is a philologist at the Provincial Museum. He has done in-depth research on metaphysics and ancient texts. And he also said, the ancient characters he transcribed from the General's temple wall last time are being studied by Mr. He. Maybe those characters contain clues to the Rui. The old man also saw us. He was about to greet us. Hello, but before he could finish speaking, Zhao Wenbin bowed deeply to Old He. He said, please, Old He, assist me. Old He hurried forward and helped Zhao Wenbin up. He said, you flatter me, my friend. Taoist, please, don't do this. Please, have a seat. After everyone sat down, Zhao Wenbin anxiously said, I'm not sure if the ancient text on the General's temple wall is related to the Rui. Old He took a puff from his old pipe. Did you explain it? Yes, it's ancient Miaojiang script. It records a strange book. It should be the Rui book. So where is this book now? I was anxiously wanting to know. The text only mentions Bashu. There's no other explanation. Wang Pengzi, equally confused after hearing this, said, Bashu is so vast. Where are we supposed to look? Zhao Wenbin, upon hearing this, gripped his teacup ever tighter. With a bang, the teacup shattered. He Lao consoled him from the side, Dao Zhang, don't rush. We need to plan this carefully. We can also look for other Taoist relics. Maybe there are more clues. Saying this, he took out another clay-sealed jar of wine. It looks very ancient. He said, let's drink first. This wine has been aged for over 2,000 years. I usually wouldn't even dare to take a sip. 2,000 years. The fat man exclaimed in surprise. Oh, I remember. These were excavated 2 years ago by Old He from a large Western Han Dynasty tomb. They moved out over 100 large jars in total. Although most of them contained less than 1/3 of the liquid, they were definitely considered exquisite wines. Later, the wine was confiscated. Old He secretly kept one jar, risking the charge of dereliction of duty. That's why we have this delicious food today. While Fatty was chattering away beside him, Jia Wenbin snatched the wine jar, pushed away from me, and drank it down in one gulp. Gulp, gulp, gulp. He finished a whole jar of wine in one go. Fatty over there was cursing him for being so sneaky. Earlier, He Lao had learned about Jia Wenbin's ordeal from Fatty, sighing beside him, "Oh, drinking like this. I'm afraid he'll get so drunk he'll sleep for days and nights." I worriedly looked at Jia Wenbin, muttering, "Let him have a good rest." Just as I finished speaking, with a bang, the empty wine jar shattered. Jia Wenbin fell from the bench to the ground, still murmuring, "Lingling." Lingling said that this 2,000-year-old nectar was intoxicating. Jia Wenbin woke up 3 days later. We arrived at the archives of the Provincial Museum, arranged by Old He. Old He explained, pointing at rows of bookshelves, "This is the archives of the Provincial Museum. If the Rui book still exists, then there must be other related records over the millennia." Jia Wenbin asked, "We're looking for special Taoist ruins similar to the General's Temple and ancient Miao script. But the number of books in the Provincial Museum archives is unimaginable, and China's religious landscape is inherently complex. Finding this book, finding clues to the Rui scroll, is like searching for a needle in a haystack. Finding it will likely depend on fate." And so began our long and arduous search for the book, from day to night, continuing to search with a mining lamp. It was after I had no idea how many days, 123, 456, of searching, when a sudden, excited roar woke me up from my sleep among the pile of books. "Xia Yi, I found it." I saw Jia Wenbin, his bloodshot eyes almost as red as a sunset, staring intently at a book he was holding in his hands. Excitedly, nearly hysterical, he shouted, "I found ancient characters similar to these." I quickly shouted back, "I'll go call Old He." Elder He, who received the news quickly, rushed over. We showed Elder He the book we found. After looking at it, Elder He nodded affirmatively. "Excellent. This and the ancient characters from the General's Temple come from the same language family. It's even older." Jia Wenbin said impatiently, "What does it say? Is it related to the Rui booklet?" Old He answered with a profound expression, "It's too obscure. Even I would need some time to study it." At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps approached. 2 people ran into the archive room, urgently calling out, "Master. Master's wife has an urgent matter." It turns out they are Master He's disciple and his wife. Master He's wife said with a mournful face to Master He, "My father passed away last night. The family is urging us to hurry back and handle the funeral." "How so sudden?" Master He looked shocked and in disbelief. Then he looked at Jia Wenbin. He showed an apologetic expression. "Taoist, I." Before He Lao could finish speaking, Jia Wenbin interrupted him. "Let's go to the countryside to handle your son's funeral first." The fat man also looked at He Lao worriedly. "Your family matters are urgent. Don't delay. I'll stay here and continue the investigation. Wait for you to return." Meanwhile, Jia Wenbin continued, "You've helped me so much. I am a Taoist priest. You might need my help on this trip. Please take me with you." He looked at Old He with a pleading expression. Will Old He agree to Wenbin's request? What kind of strange events will they encounter next? Please watch the next episode. Burial after death. The sedan chair carrying the paper effigy inexplicably grew heavier and heavier. It finally collapsed when crossing the ferry bridge. The soul wouldn't leave. Why is this? Please watch this episode, on crossing the ferry bridge. In rural areas, for those who were somewhat well off after they passed away, a ceremony needs to be held before burial. Call it the immortal bridge. At the right time, place a paper effigy on the sedan chair. Then, from the room where the coffin is placed, build a bamboo bridge in the middle of the courtyard. At the time of burial, the relatives carry the paper effigy across the bamboo bridge. Crossing the immortal bridge symbolizes sending the deceased to the underworld. From then on, it's the separation of the living and the dead. Humans and ghosts are on different paths.